What's happening, Tom?
Hey, Matt, what's going on, man?
You know, living the dream. Yeah, living the dream. Yeah. It's funny because we're having a weird weather situation going on in the world right now, right? Like here in the Northeast, it is January and I mean, it's not cold. Like
I was like, oh shit, I don't need a jacket today.
Yeah, and it's not cold and it's messing with me in a pretty big bad way because like my body wants it to be cold because it's wintertime and it's not. And so I feel like and my allergies randomly are fairly bad. I'm like, what the fuck? It's like you're not supposed to have allergies in the wintertime.
I was outside grilling dinner and I was like, why are my eyes watering?
Yeah, right. Well, the plants and trees are going to start blooming if this shit keeps up.
Yeah. Well, the thing that I hate about it, like the mild winters, is like the mosquitoes are just going to be merciless in the summer.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
We didn't kill all the larvae.
Yeah. No, it's going to be, completely. I can absolutely see that coming. Yeah. I kind of want, I mean, I don't know. As a kid who grew up in California, like we didn't really have seasons, right? Like, I mean, it wasn't really, I lived in the North Bay and it was like, you just kind of had weather, right? Like, as Mark Twain said, the coldest winter I ever spent was a summer in San Francisco. And like, that's just like, when I moved to the East Coast, I was like actually particularly excited about like seasons, like, oh, it's really fucking cold. Ooh, it's really fucking hot. Ooh, then there's these two good spots.
Yeah. I feel like that's all going away.
I do feel like that. And I didn't know if it was like the conspiracy theorist in me or if it was actually my observation.
I remember the transitions.
Right.
And now it's like, no, it's cold. Now it's hot. And I think we're in that perfect storm where we're going to end up getting like 3 feet of snow dumped on us just randomly one day in like March.
Oh, no, that's coming for sure. I mean, it's going to be no snow days all year. And all of a sudden kids are going to have like 9 snow days in a row. Because
isn't that so weird though? Now they're like, look, if we run out of snow days, hey, remember what we did for COVID?
And
everybody just log in.
The funny thing is though, is that should have already happened, right? Like,
it's amazing what the catalyst to motivate technological change.
Yeah, is. God fucking forbid common sense motivate change. Like, no, not that. That's absolutely bonkers. We can't possibly apply common sense to this equation. It's like, and it's funny. We have like, I swear the school system really tries to mess with you on purpose. Like my daughter has a dance this weekend.
Oh shit. So does mine.
On President's Day weekend. Why earth would you have a dance, a school event on a weekend where every parent is going, I want to get the fuck out of town and hang out with my family. Because I got an extra day. Like, but no, I got to go to this stupid dance. I can't have the dance next weekend. Like when everybody's home. Like, I mean, I just don't get it. Like, it's like you're trying to make this hard.
A lot of the parents or a lot of the teachers have to be parents too. They probably
are. Right. How could this be better? Yeah. Why on earth are we doing this? Yeah. It is crazy. And it's funny. I don't know how it is everywhere. I think we've all kind of tuned out to the COVID drum.
Yeah.
But like, this new variant that we're seeing now is fascinating because like, it's so familiar. It's a story we've heard before, like when Omicron was out, right?
Yeah.
We all heard about it and we all reacted however we reacted, but it was news. Now this one is like, everyone's like, I didn't even hear that story. I don't know
what do you even want me to do about it at this point?
Exactly. What exactly should I be doing at this point? Like, and so it is one of those interesting things because I just found out recently about the newest, what is it? Kraken, I think it is the name of that, which by the way, best name for
they're actually, because I saw a bunch of letters and numbers and I went, oh, that sounds
yeah. Kraken COVID, I think is Kraken COVID variant. Now it's spelled, Kraken, Kraken, COVID vaccine.
That's not a bad rum, by the way.
But that's my point. I'm like, wow. So now we're just basically like meme naming like COVID variations. Like,
we get the human names. Oh, this is the Scott variant.
Yeah.
I got
Right.
Scott. I can't come to work.
Oh man, yeah. I mean, it's dude, it's gonna be crazy. But yeah, I mean, and it's funny. You and I were just talking ahead of the show about like numbers here in the Northeast going up, and like we looked at the calendar, and you're like, yeah, look how predictable that was, right? Like a week and change after New Year's, where everybody was like all up in each other's business, and
Absolutely, yeah.
indoors, probably foot and a half to a foot away from the next person.
Well, and then the clock strikes 12 and everyone starts making out. So
Yeah, right. And like the funny part about that is like none of that's wrong. Like I have no problem with any of that, but like, you know, I don't think we should be confused when, almost to the minute the incubation period of COVID later, you've got
yeah,
you've got a
spike,
whole
yeah.
shit ton of people having a spike, right? And then, like I mean, it's like, all right, well, you could get bronchitis in the same situation, like,
Yeah,
but
yeah. It's so weird to me how we went from like almost a different lifetime. Like, oh my God, we can't leave the house, can't leave the house, can't leave the house. Now it's like, I got COVID again.
yeah, I
It's
mean,
like,
right. And it's like, but I find it funny because like I was talking about this with somebody else. I mean, I don't know about you, but like I have a very distant memory of lockdown. Like it's like it happened like 20 years ago. Like
it feels so much further than
right.
like, and also this time pre-COVID. Like
Not even, I
I'm
have
having a
zero
hard time
recollection
remembering
of time
who was
pre-COVID. Are you
I
kidding me? Yeah.
pre-COVID.
Yeah, no,
Did
come
I
on,
have
stop.
hair? Did I?
Yeah.
like,
Yeah, I look at pictures of stuff that happened pre-COVID, and I'm like, I don't remember that. I don't know. That was my brain has blocked that out. I don't.
Well,
It's like, and
my
that's crazy.
13-year-old was throwing it in my face that we haven't had a vacation, right? And it's like,
Yeah.
well, the clinic got busy. This happened, that happened. Oh yeah, by the way, there was like 2 years where we weren't supposed to travel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
By the way, yeah.
By the
Just
way,
FYI,
I know it's a significantly larger portion of your lifetime than mine.
Yeah. It's funny. I had lunch club with a woman from Toronto today, and she was in her early 20s, maybe mid 20s, and she has to be in her mid 20s because she spent COVID in her condo in Toronto, but she's a single woman in her early 20s in COVID. I was like, I spent my 20s in New York City and like can't even actually imagine like right now, hey, lock me in my house with my kids, it's fine, like I'm an adult, like I'm fine, I'll just sit on the couch and watch everything on Netflix with bottles of wine.
Yeah.
But that wasn't my life when I was 23. You know what I mean? Like not even a little bit, right? It was the first time I'd really actually sat with the idea of what it might have been like to be 22, 21 in a major metropolitan area during lockdown, right? Like it just wasn't me.
It would be better now than then, though, right? Because like
no, her and I were talking about like actually lockdown itself, right? So
no. But I'm saying like when we were in our 20s.
Oh.
Like you didn't have Netflix. You didn't have a cell phone. You didn't have. You probably had a cell phone, but
I had a cell phone. But
you're playing Snake on it. You're not
downloading
apps.
And YouPorn wasn't around yet, so you couldn't even. There's nothing to like watch.
If you wanted to get a dirty photo, it took 15 minutes.
Yeah, it did, and you had to either go on like the dark web or pay like $7.99 for some, and you're like, I'm clearly not doing that.
And the photo halfway downloads, and you're like, that chick isn't even hot.
Yeah, no. Moving right along, right? And like, no. I mean, no, you're right. I mean, if I had to be stuck at home in a global pandemic, I would much rather do so in this day and age than when I was that actual age. And can you even, I mean, honestly, it makes my head spin thinking more bazonkers would be, could you imagine being a fifth grader in that environment when you and I were in fifth grade?
My wife, like she stopped teaching a while ago, but she was doing some tutoring, and a lot of the kids, it was those kids that like didn't have kindergarten, and now they show up to first grade and they're like, what the hell are we doing? You know,
Well,
there wasn't even an introduction to school for them.
right. But I mean, imagine what would have happened when you and I were in 5th grade. Like, it would have been a phone tree from the principal
Yeah.
to like the room moms to then call everyone in the school to say, here's what the recommendations are. But every parent would legitimately become the overnight teacher. And that means all the materials, whatever you can get from school in a drive-through box line, maybe.
Oh God.
But your internet would have been the encyclopedia that your parents bought from a door-to-door encyclopedia salesman.
Absolutely. That's so crazy, man.
And like that would have been it. And so whatever year your parents decided to make that singular purchase, like, that was the that was the cutoff.
Like, your knowledge base.
Yeah, right. Like it was like, my parents bought the 1983 version and it's 1989, so this shit might be a bit out of date. And like, even think of that. Like, I mean, that's another thing, right? Think about that. When your grandparents and my grandparents were around and buying encyclopedias, they could keep it for 10 years and it would, shit would be a little bit out of date, but by and large, it would be fine.
Yeah, current events would be the only thing missing. Yeah.
Right. But now, straight facts, like basic physics, basic like astrological, I'm like a telescope nerd, right? Like astronomy, it changes by the hour now. Like it would forget about by the year. It's like, you got things like James Webb discovering like a 1 billion-year-old galaxy. Like every 5 seconds, it seems like there's another thing coming out. You're like, oh, fuck. Like that one picture, they're like, this one picture has 1 million visible galaxies. I'm like, what? And they're like, and the apparent field of view is the grain of sand held at arm's distance on Earth. Insanity. And I was like, are you fucking joking me? Like that is, so can imagine it. So imagine a world where we are teaching our kids about anything, like anything, pick a topic. and that's what our tool set would have been. Like we literally would have had an outdated set of encyclopedias and a phone tree from whatever school you kids went to.
And if we think we were shut down now, like what are you doing? You can't go to work. There's nothing.
Well, and that's the other thing. If mom and dad aren't going to work either, then they are literally the teachers, or you guys are just all sitting around developing a meth addiction.
Yeah.
Like there's no way. And it's like, to your point, and I think just generally though, like, I mean, there's a couple ways you could look at that, right? Like on the one hand, it would have been extremely isolating because we didn't have social media. We didn't have internet. We didn't have any of that. Right. So the mental health effects of isolation would be amplified.
I mean, they're horrible now.
No, I know, but can you imagine if there was
exponentially worse.
Yeah, so now on the flip side, though, the internet has softened us up, like, to turduckens, like, we are not exactly hardy species anymore.
No.
And so, like, but back when we were kids, like we shut down in a pandemic and grandpa's like rolling up his sleeves being like, I'll fucking stab a motherfucker that comes on my front porch. And
just
like
sitting on the front porch with a shotgun.
Yeah, right. And he's like, nope, we're going to grow our own food. We're going to teach our kids in school. This shit is fine. We got this under, like we're good. And like my parents would have just rolled up their sleeves and it would have just been in it. Not saying that we didn't do that, but we did it with Zoom calls and fucking, digital classrooms.
Moving, yeah.
We kept moving for the most part. We didn't change. Like, we were the ultimate human expression of the human condition. In spite of any circumstance, we're just still going to be humans. It doesn't matter. At all costs, we are going to just remain ourselves, right? We're not going to change at all.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but like, I can't even imagine. And like, I forgot how we got down that rabbit hole, but like, it is funny how perception to these things changes. Like my grandparents saw COVID when they were, in the 80s. My grandparents would have been like stepping on our face if we were walking out of the house. They're like, absolutely not a chance. Like, and then you're bitching about a mask. They'd be, put your fucking mask on, boy, and shut your face. Like, it'd just be, that's it.
It's really funny too, because I think, and somebody pointed to 9/11 being when the conspiracy thing, like there
Yeah.
was always conspiracy things, like, we didn't land on the moon, all that stuff. But 9/11 was when it really got polarized, and you
Wait,
had
are
like
you one of
all,
these guys that believes we landed on the moon?
yeah, the moon is actually hollow.
No, yeah, totally.
When
It's
things hit it and it
uh
dings, and yeah, but so it's funny to me that like that gave birth to like a lot of this anti-science movement.
Yeah, but look
Uh,
at the timing, man. This is a Venn diagram of predictability, right? Like you have a major catastrophe, right? That's like hugely impactful culturally and I was in New York City for 9/11,
yeah,
literally watched the plane hit the building, the second one. Like to me personally, that event was not a news story. It was a life experience,
I
right?
get
Like
that. I get that. I'm there with you. Yeah.
yeah, and so like I can tell you firsthand, people, especially that were that close to it, were fucking on the internet relentlessly about that. And like that was really one of those moments that the tools that you had at your disposal became like extremely valuable, right? Like, and so 2001, we are fucking possessed by who were these motherfuckers in these planes? What the fuck happened? Like everybody,
Yeah. And
and
I mean, weeks of just that, like the radio stations just talking about it constantly.
well, yeah, and like I've got dozens of
music.
I directly or indirectly know
Mm-hmm.
dozens of people that died in World Trade Center.
Yeah.
And like that is like motivation, right? Like when you're in that experience,
Yeah.
you're motivated to get information. So I guess my point is like when you've got this much like reason to go digging around, and the internet was not, I wouldn't say primordial, but certainly post zygote stage at that point, right? Like
Yeah.
the internet was kind of moving along by 2001, right? Like it was kind of, it was on its way.
It wasn't fully fleshed out on your phone or anything, but it was there.
No, but I had a Trio probably right around that time. And
yeah,
like, so like that was like a black and white Palm Pilot,
yeah.
fancy Palm Pilot version of,
I think I had a BlackBerry.
Your BlackBerry was around that same time, sure.
I think I had a BlackBerry, yeah.
Plus or minus, but those were like, but I guess once you get that many people into anything,
yeah,
it's and I would love to talk to a statistician about this, but I am positive that there's stats behind. Once you get a certain critical mass, what are the chances that you're going to get a splinter interpretation that leads to a conspiracy?
I would also say the and they were talking about this with one of the shootings. They were saying like when the conspiracy theories start, it's normally because no one can rationally believe that somebody would do something that horrible, and that the simple explanation that's given is right. Now, here's a kind of weird thing to tie it back to your little like your lunch chat there. What is that called?
Lunch club, yeah.
Lunch club. She said she's in her early 20s. She probably, like, for us, it's a part of who we are.
Sure.
For her, it was like a historic event.
Sure.
That's fucking crazy, right?
Well, and I told her the same thing. I told her something very similar. I was like, for me, COVID was basically like an introspective sport. We nested, we did a lot of family things. We looked inward, right? Like it was very internalized, right? Like internalizing, I should say. But I wasn't single in a metropolitan area. And so in a phase of my life, or a season of my life rather, that I want to be as extroverted sunshine as humanly possible.
I gotcha, yeah.
That would run contrary to what was actually possible, right? And like that is got to be devastating to your mental,
emotionally, mentally, like, all of it, yeah.
Right, because you're, look, you're peacocking at 23, right? You're like, everybody, look at how cool I am, right? Like that's what you're doing. That's like what you should be doing
now.
Yeah, you're proud to be an adult. You're proud to be on your own. You're actually living on your own steam. You know what I mean? Like it's very, very empowering. Like, and then to be stuffed in your fucking condo, your 1-bedroom condo or studio. Oh, it's got to be brutal.
Staring at a wall. Yeah, man.
but yeah, I mean, I think that like the and this is we had a couple technology things we wanted to talk about tonight, but but this is actually like a weird lead into it. But
Yeah,
when you look at technology like that, right? And I would add to what you said and say that the reason conspiracy theories kind of go is because people cannot functionally like they can't rationalize a vacuum.
yeah,
And so when they don't have answers, even though in life biologically, if we had an answer to a new health problem in a year, that would be in and of itself amazing, right?
yeah.
The only and if you look at COVID, even literally every scientist on the planet stopped what they were doing to research COVID. Like that is probably never going to happen again in my lifetime,
I
hopefully
hope
anyway.
not.
Right. Where basically you could be studying anything, but if you had a microscope, a mass spectrometer, a fucking centrifuge, they're like, you're on COVID duty. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, it was like,
Well, that was the thing. Even with the vaccine development, they're like, everyone's saying, oh, vaccines normally take 10, 20 years to develop. And it's like, yeah, that's because they got to get 50,000, 100,000 human participants in a study. And sure enough, people around the world were like, put the shot in me. Let's see what happens.
right.
Yeah, so they moved a lot quicker because of all of that.
Well, but that's another thing about technology, right? They were only able to do that because they had a distribution model for communication that is second to none. Like the one thing we can do better than we ever have in history is communicate. Ironic given all the shit that goes on online and how poorly we communicate. But if you had a gun to your head and you got to get a fucking vaccine out the door, guess what? You've got like literally all the pathways available to you that you could ever need, right? Like and we talked at the top of the show about like what isn't it funny what the impetus is to get people to change. Imagine how many more vaccines would have come, how much more faster had we just communicated a little bit better and given people a way to do it, right? Like I knew a guy, I think we talked about it on the show once, about that guy who was doing orphaned treatments and he had a USB drive around his neck. It was a guy.
You did.
Yeah. Well, I the reason he was so passionate about it is, and again, don't quote me on the FDA stuff, but FDA won't even like consider a drug unless it was something like helps more than 50% or doesn't hurt less than 50% or something. There's like some very broad number. But if you developed a cure for cancer, but only 1 in 10 million people have that cancer, FDA is not even going to touch it. Like they're just going to be like,
going to test it. Yeah.
But guess what? Guess who wants to know that?
The one person.
Yeah, the one person that's fucking got it. And he was very passionate about connecting people. So he actually was one of the first pioneers of gene. That USB drive had his genome on it, and it was before 23andMe, and it was like, like they were sequencing it at a laboratory level, and he owned a laboratory, and so like they were basically starting another like a side hustle on this. But his idea was amazing. Actually, it was important kind of thinking, and like kind of thinking you just don't see in the world right now.
Yeah, and it's funny once you have those exponential factors that all come into play. Now it's like, well, what do? Swab the inside of your cheek, send it off in an envelope,
right?
And 6 weeks later, we know your whole genome.
I mean, and I got into this whole fucking debate with this teacher friend of mine, and yeah, she was a little drunk, but no big deal. But like she found out that I was like, thinking about swabbing Cooper and Riley, and she like lost her mind. She's like, what the fuck? And then and she's like, and then I she knew I had done it, and she was like, I can't believe you would willfully give your DNA to somebody. And I was like, look, honey, I mean, I don't, at the end of the day, and actually, you tell me this. Do you think I'm wrong here? This is my prediction. We're in 2023. I'm guessing, see, it's hard to guess a year because the shit's evolving so fast, but let's just try to throw a dart at this. I think by 20, when you're born, a drop of your blood is going to be, taken, and you're going to be sequenced at birth, like immediately. Health insurance companies, I don't think will have access to it because I think we're going to hold on to that dignity for a little while. But who knows? That's on the table for possible problems, right?
Yeah.
But let's just assume that the good parts come out, and I don't think you're going to be able to share, with like health insurance companies and the like. But I do think that you're going to have your DNA productized for your own benefit, either from a health perspective, a cosmetic augmentation perspective, a straight up medical perspective.
Mhm.
Like, I don't think that it's irrational to think that by 2030, and quite frankly, the reason I'm even hesitating is I actually think that number is probably going to be like
Sooner.
less.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Because if I can do right now, and I just got my ancestry thing updated, and my family's from the Azores in Portugal, right?
Mhm.
And I just saw this article that was like, oh, your family might think you're Portuguese, but you're actually Welsh. And I looked at my thing, and I'm only like 7% or something like that Portuguese.
Yeah.
But my whole family thinks that they're Portuguese, and my entire life, everyone, my mother, my grandmother, my great grandmother, everyone says we're Portuguese. They speak Portuguese. They're all Portuguese. They're not. There was like some migration in like the 16 or 1700s, I forget, that was like escaping Wales for religious purposes, and they just fucking left and they landed in the Azores.
And
And
it's how crazy is that, you know?
yeah, I mean, it's absolutely crazy, right? And like, right. And like, but this is all like, I'm like, this is what we're doing with technology. And here's the thing, man. When who was fighting me on this the other day? Somebody was saying, "Oh, I know what it was. The AI guy." Did we talk about that on here?
I don't know what we talk about AI a lot, man.
Yeah, the AI. There was a art competition where this guy won.
Oh, the art show. Yeah, the art.
And the guy won, and people were like tweaking out. They're like, "What the fuck?" And they're like, "You didn't draw this. You're not the artist." And he goes, "The fuck, I'm not. It took me like 800 iterations to see the painting, and whatever the number was, it was like he didn't just say, hey, make me like an award-winning painting, and then took the first result and walked out the door. No, he learned from his mistakes. He crafted things. He like trial and error it. Like,
it was work.
It was work. And like the reality is like, did Andy Warhol paint the Campbell soup can? No, he took a picture of it and silk screened it. Like, that's the same thing. It's like, it's a new tool, right? Like, it's a new paintbrush. Like, it's not the same. And to measure anything on an old paintbrush scale would be nonsensical, because it's not like
it's funny because that reminds me, and I forgot what the documentary was. It was a documentary on music, right? They were talking about electronic music, and basically, a lot of the old school rockers were knocking it, and then they said, well, Trent Reznor came along,
right,
and like, now we got it. He was actually making music, even though he was sampling things and doing,
right. And you look at Dead Mouse 5, and
it's, of course it's music,
of
that's
course
not debatable ananymore.
Well, and it's even funnier. I took that you ever heard that subscription course, Masterclass?
Yeah.
I have that, and I don't candidly, I don't listen to it as much as I'd like, but I do take a few classes a year on it. So, and it's a pretty inexpensive subscription, so I just keep it. But Dead Mouse 5 was, I think, the first or second one that I watched. And he's got a masterclass on there, and it's fucking fascinating because he's talking about music theory. What he's talking about is music theory, but what he's not saying is music theory because he's not a musician. So he didn't even know that's, I mean, I'm sure he knew, but he wasn't using that vocabulary. You can tell it wasn't like, his brain didn't think like a musician, clearly, because he wasn't a musician.
So he was, it was thinking like a musician. He couldn't
put labels on it.
Language that would sound like somebody who's been to a music theory program.
Yeah. And so what's fascinating about, and I actually experimented myself with like some digital audio workstation type stuff. And I was fascinated by it because it's like, basically like, if you know Photoshop and you know how to play the piano, which both of those are check boxes for me, doing like that kind of mixing work is actually like pretty straightforward, because it is music theory a little bit to give you your chord progressions and like kind of paint a picture, right, with that. In my case, I actually use I have a 88 key keyboard here, like that plugs right in, so I literally could just translate it right over.
Yeah.
But then you start thinking like Photoshop, and you go, well, I'm not a concert pianist, so my timing's but I can select all and snap to measure, and it'll rearrange the notes,
clean it up for you,
and just move it over to the right time signature. And then you're like, well, you know what? I had this at 4/4. I want to give it a shot at 2/4. I'm not sure. And like, you can just keep changing it. And it's interesting, but deadmau5 doesn't play music. He knows how to use the tool, and you could be like, oh, like, I know that this is notes spaced out like this sound pleasant, and I know this, and I can, copy and paste notes all over the place, but he's making it, but he just doesn't play it. And he even said in there, I wish I knew how to play the piano, because it would make this easier. I have to draw it instead of playing it, because I don't know how to play the fucking
But isn't
piano.
it, but like, when we're talking about art, that's kind of the crazy thing, how
But that's
you
the thing.
get
He's
there is not.
Right. That was my point. And like, here you got a guy who is, by all worldly measure of the word, of a world-renowned musician.
Yeah.
Who doesn't know how to play any musical instruments at all. But he knows his instrument. So like I said, if you use an old yardstick, you can't measure the current tool, right?
Yeah.
If you measure deadmau5 as a musician against the yardstick of how many instruments do you play, he fails objectively. Like, he's not a musician. But is that a yardstick that is even relevant anymore, given the tools we use? No.
You remember that old, like, the cartoon was, it's been around for like ever. But they would say, all right, now for the final test, and they had a whole bunch of different animals, sitting at like a classroom type setup. Go climb that tree, and it was a fish in a fish bowl, and there's a whole bunch of animals that can't, and the monkey's like, I'm nailing this one.
Yeah.
And it's like, you're measuring by one objective measure that does not show.
It doesn't make sense.
The true genius of the individual.
But I think that's where we're at with health, and the reason it was a long route back to this, but like, the reason I brought all that up was like, we see this pattern in so many places in our existence, right? Like, where you have this disconnect from common sense, right? Like, it does, like, we actually know the common sense. Like, deadmau5 absolutely can be a musician without playing the piano. Why? Because his instrument is a laptop. Like, and that makes sense. So we have to all agree that there are multiple ways to measure the exact same outcome.
Yeah.
Right. And like, the problem is that, and this is where it all starts to come back together, right? Back to our grandparents with the encyclopedias, right? Like, that was okay to punt things for long periods of time before reevaluating your underlying assumptions of the thing, and without reevaluating the yardstick of the thing. Now, it doesn't even behoove you to create a yardstick anymore, because it's going to change so rapidly.
Yeah.
So like, one of the things, and you and I talked about this, I think, on the show and outside as well, but when COVID was at its zenith, one of the things that pissed me off about the more ignorant side of that equation was that they were indicting people like Fauci, which, listen, I don't think he was flawless at all. Like, I think he's got plenty of things we can poke fun at and poke holes in, right? But the reality is like, when I hear people say, hey, Fauci's an idiot, one day he said this, one day he said that, I'm like, no, you're the idiot. Yeah, you're the idiot for thinking he's an idiot for changing his mind on something that no one's ever heard of or dealt with before now.
Yeah.
Because every day, and you and I both on our book report episode talked about with Lifespan, one of the biggest downfalls he says in that book about Lifespan is, how do I have chapter deadlines on a topic like Lifespan?
Rapidly changing. Yeah.
I could, by the time I write chapter 6, chapter 1 could be out of date.
Well, that was in the auto. Did you?
Yeah, I did the Audible with
the interviews in the middle chapters saying that, like, look, I'm writing this chapter and then I got a new study sitting on my
Sure.
desk and it's like,
Right.
oh shit, I got to change this whole thing.
Right. And I might have to rewrite chapter 3 4 times and chapter 1 once. And,
I'm wondering if he's going to release a new version where it's like, yeah, don't do that.
yeah.
No,
Well, I
this is better.
mean, look, honestly, just to do a quick side wormhole on that, like,
Yeah.
there was a huge study that came out last year, and I'll try to find it, but that said basically like taking metformin actually causes a hyper like insult to your mitochondria. Like it basically like there's like a big bad thing that actually negates the life extension parts that it actually brings to the table.
That's crazy, man.
So it could end up being a wash. And if that's the case, that's probably not great. But yeah, that's the thing though. Like this shit changes like so fast, right? And so like I almost think that like, and in full disclosure, like that multidisciplinary thinking book that I'm working on at the moment, like one of the core things we're working on for this book is that it used to behoove us to have underlying assumptions because it kept us alive, right? Like it was, but we're in an age where underlying assumptions actually could kill us, right? Like now underlying assumptions have gone the exact opposite direction. And like the trick to ultimate survivability and adaptability is to just never form an assumption ever about anything. Because if you do, and at least that's not entirely true because I guess you could, but it should be a here and now, like a time and place assumption, not an assumption that's going to be like time in memoriam, right? Like we got to move our brains around. Like neuroplasticity needs to really be the reigning champion of like post COVID. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. Am I crazy? Am I acting like a conspiracy guy now?
I don't think so. I think we're hyper polarized, and I think that's what ends up happening, right? Like it's like, hey, some of us really want to move forward, and others of us are like, no, we're gonna.
But hyperpolarized is just another word for saying underlying assumptions, right? Like in a way,
absolutely,
because you're like, I assume if you're a Democrat, you assume all Republicans are fucking redneck dumbasses, right? And if you're a Republican, you think every Democrat's a fucking snowflake, right? Like so,
yeah.
Look, those are underlying assumptions, right? Like, and like that is absolutely undeniable, right? And so that's what I think is so funny. I don't mind fighting with somebody. I don't mind disagreeing with somebody. What I do mind is when somebody doesn't accept the fact that theirs is not the only opinion, right? Like, we don't have to agree, and I'm happy to make fun of you to your face while you're making fun of me to my face about whatever it is.
I gotcha.
You know what I mean? Like,
and I'm of this other mindset where it's like, look, I'm just gonna get too angry. I don't even want to talk to you because, like, unless if I say here's something that I can demonstrate, here's a fact, here's what we know right now, here's the source I got it from, and you're like, yeah, I don't believe that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, even that though, I mean, honestly, I mean, we live in a weird disinformation phase, right?
Absolutely.
Like, so like I can give you 5 things as my bibliography for my position statement. Doesn't mean it's fucking right. Yeah. But here's the thing. When you layer on a healthy dose of confirmation bias, which is pretty much the biggest bias to everybody, right?
Everybody, yeah.
Guess what I'm not looking for? Contradictory evidence to my thesis statement. Like, I'm just not doing that. Like, it's just not going to happen. And like, this is the problem, right? Like, and like in our ecosystem here, we talk about weird health shit.
Yeah.
Why do you think we even have a fucking show to talk about stuff like this? Because fucking people are like crazy.
Well, and like this is we're probably going to eat some crow down the road, and we probably
for sure, but
that's like, hey man, a new study came out. Oh, we're fucked.
No, but I would never say that. I literally would never say that. You know why? Because I predict everything. Tom, I'm going to say it right now. Tell you what, sit down, buckle in. Here it goes.
I'm down.
I'm laying it on the line. I personally guarantee that 100% of the shit we talk about on the show is probably not going to be true forever. I mean, there it is. Full disclosure.
It's such a weird thing too, where it's I read this one article a while ago, and this relatively well-known MD had researched all of these. This is the standard response in Western medicine. We do this, we do that, we do this. And he found out like 90% of the shit was completely wrong. These
Sure.
huge assumptions
Yeah,
that they've
why?
been making forever in medicine. And he went to a conference and he's talking to a whole like giant auditorium full of doctors. And he's like, this is it. This is where I get crucified. And he said his stuff, and some of it was about cholesterol, some of it was about like all these like heart healthy diets and these things.
Sure.
And all the doctors, rather than getting pissed off and calling him a quack, they all kind of like, yeah, I can see that.
Yeah.
Like it was like, I remember the article title was like lies. They're all lies or something like that. It was.
But I mean, this sort of irrational thought that like everybody's going to have the right answer right out of the gate. Like COVID's a great example. It's super germane. Like, dude, we all found out about COVID at the exact same fucking time. Like everybody, all the scientists who made the vaccines, all the scientists who didn't make the vaccines but tried, like all the people like you and me, all the teachers, all the fucking everybody found out about it at the same fucking time. Like, so why in the world do you think fucking Fauci or the head of this organization or Pfizer or anybody would have any fucking more information than you? Like, I mean, granted, they get it
I would
quicker.
say they definitely had better information.
Well, no, they do. Obviously not forever, but when it terms, okay, let me rephrase. Actually, we all started the race at the same time.
Oh yeah.
Like you know what I mean? Like that is undeniably true. So yeah, they have better tools, more money, more resources, more motivation. Like, yeah, I get all that.
Better pedigree, better education to do that too.
Yeah, right. They got everything that they need to do this, right? So I get it. That's not a big deal. But the problem really that I have is with people that don't understand that. Like there is a shade of gray here, right? Like I expect that the CDC will have better information than I have. But I also don't expect that it'll happen in 5 minutes, right? Like it's not.
I almost feel like that's partially and not I mean all the biases aside, I feel like that's partially our like I can order something on Amazon and it's there the next morning. You know what I'm saying? It's this instant gratification mode that we're in now.
Sure.
So if you're going to tell me that I can't get the information I need right then and there, and it's going to take a while, or the information is going to change, I don't think a lot of people want to hear that.
No, nobody wants to hear that. No, of course not. And I get that, but I guess like I think where it's bothersome, like we talk about all these like health things, right? And like we live in one of the we live in the greatest time for health technology ever, right? Like we haven't we didn't talk about it yet today, or maybe we won't, but like they're coming up with all kinds of crazy shit, like t-shirts that are constant EKGs, right? Like that's exciting for people who need EKGs to stay alive, right? Or
like you don't need it taped to your body,
it's not a telemetry strap or whatever they call that thing, like like the Garmin has them around you, like I got all neurotic about those things when I first started running. I'm like, oh, put one of these on. And just like 99.99% of the world, guess how much I did with that information?
Yeah.
Nothing.
Well, that's, and I think we touched on that last time when you were talking about those two younger guys that were riding bikes with you. You have a mound full of information, but like, what is the purpose of it, right? Like well, we might like it might make us feel like we're doing the right thing, but
I mean, all I want it for is to make fun of you for still using Muse or the God helmet or whatever the fucking crazy shit you're gonna do.
Man, I'm getting closer and closer
to the God helmet.
Oh God, yeah.
I mean, I really want I would love to really watch you do that, like just from afar.
I feel like
maybe even over a Zoom call.
So I feel like the experiments are designed that way. You're supposed to be in the room with a blindfold on in the dark by yourself.
Oh yeah. See, like here's the thing though. Could I not? And I have. So I'm 100% sure that this is a true statement. If you sat alone by yourself in the dark and you did shamanic breathing for 30 seconds, you'd be tripping balls. Like
I think like they talk about the most silent room in the world, and the longest anybody could ever stay in there was just a couple of minutes
right.
because it was so unnerving.
Sure.
I feel like there's so many ways to alter your consciousness. The one thing that is cool to me here is it's an electromagnetic frequency. You have magnetite in your fucking brain. You can pulse different electromagnetic signals across it to change your consciousness. And then if you have a bad time, this is not a 12-hour ayahuasca trip.
You just take it off.
You take the goddamn helmet off.
And it's just instantly back to normal. See, like,
I'm sure there's a kind of calm down part. There's got to be like, oh, cool, I'm safe, everything's cool. But it's not like, hey, I want to get off this ride.
Right. And like, that's a little hard to do if you took 400 mics of LSD or, 2/8, a quarter of shrooms.
There are those people that argue that like even a bad trip is potentially like what you needed to see, the information that your subconscious was trying to give you or something like that.
Well, I got into this. I'm in this current research sort of vortex about like death and rebirth. And like how really functional, like high functioning humans generally have this thing in common where they're going through a constant process of death and rebirth. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And I find that interesting because like that's hallucinations, right? Like that's LSD. That's mushrooms, right? Every time I had ever done LSD, like in a recreational dose, like your old self dies and your new self emerges. It might not be all that different, but it's different.
You've been changed, yeah.
And you can't regress. Like the reason why it's a death and rebirth is because the person you were previously is no longer available for download.
And I think you're right with that. Because I like my first float tank experience.
Yeah, that's very similar.
Hey, where did I go? You know, and there was a minute there where I wasn't there. What happened?
Yeah, and that's not uncommon. Actually, it's float tanks are a lot like hallucinating.
That might be like, whew.
Float tanks are actually a lot like
now.
Yeah, I think float tanks are a lot like a mushroom, like a heavy mushroom dose.
Yeah, but once again, you don't you're probably not going to throw up, and
no.
and two, you don't like it, you pop that door open, you're good to go,
and you're out the door. Yeah. I mean, I think maybe it's because I did LSD more than 0 times that I'm like that death and rebirth process. Let me rephrase it. That death and rebirth process, I think, makes it so that I don't look at these things in such absolute terms, and that I have a complete plasticity, almost vulcanized feel for this, right? Everything's sort of Gumby, right? Like I do believe things, and I do think that there are certain things that are absolutely right or wrong, but even in an absolute sense, I'm willing to listen at least to an argument about it because like I haven't experienced every experience on the planet. So my underlying assumption of something being right or wrong, good or bad, is framed on what little I could imagine about the topic.
On your perspective about,
Right. So like if somebody comes to me and has a counter argument, like I might, like I said earlier, I'll fucking make fun of you all day after you're done talking, but I still want to hear what you had to say, because I mean, if you are an idiot, I desperately want to make fun of a new person. So like, bring it on.
Just get it all out.
Whatever you need, buddy. Let us have it. Let's get this out in the open because I got some friends that really want to hear what a lunatic you are.
Yeah. But and it's funny where like, so I'm the guy that is now making the newer version of the God helmet, the Shiva device.
That. Yep.
He's really taking this eagle eye perspective on near-death experiences, on reincarnation, and looking at it through the lens of a scientist, like not like, oh, that's all fucking made up, but what would near-death experiences tell us if they're consistently the same? What does it tell us about our culture? What does it tell us about humanity as a whole? And then, hey, in Thailand, these experiences go like this. In the US, these experiences go like this. You change a couple of things around, the concepts are still the same.
Sure.
So there's a universal thing happening, you know? And it's pretty cool where, like, talking about that, you know, this kind of like us not knowing everything. You have that idea that, like, even though I don't know everything, not everything is going to be completely unfamiliar. Like, there might be some pre-programming somewhere in
Sure.
your code that, like, you know, this might not be your first rodeo.
Right. Oh no,
You know,
absolutely.
it's like,
But like, if you look at it like too, like, I mean, and this is something that I'm getting to as I get older. It's funny. I'm going in a weird way. You know, some people get older, they get more religious. Like,
yeah,
you
yeah.
know, I'm actually going the exact opposite direction, right?
Me too.
The older I get, I'm going like, look, you know, I grew up Catholic and we call our dude God, right? Like that's like our thing. But like if I grew up in a Muslim country, you know, I'd have Allah, and like you know, every culture's got a different sort of centerpiece.
Yeah, yeah.
But like the cosmic bind that and the cosmic connection that we all share, we all know what it is. Like without putting a word on it, like
Yeah.
internally, we all know what that is. Our incessant need to put labels on Christianity killed a gabillion people because their God's dick was bigger than everybody else's.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't make sense, right? Like it
Yeah,
really
yeah, like I'm pretty sure it says thou shalt not kill.
Yeah, like yeah, we don't even need to go down this rabbit hole. But I mean, it's
Yeah.
an obvious fucking ridiculous natured thing, right? Like it's clearly wackadoo.
Yeah, yeah.
But here's the thing: God isn't wackadoo. Like, and I'm just going to use God as a term to sort of summarily define all of them, just because that was my familiarity. But like the presence of a universal cosmic force is felt in every cell of our body. Like it's in everything we do, right? Everything you and I talk about is about extending life and connecting to the flow more. Like, why the fuck would you want to do either of those things, right? Like, because you're connected to the cosmic force, right? Like that's just, you know, and it moves you, right? And like, so whether I call it Buddha or Allah or God or fucking whatever, like it doesn't matter. Like we're all talking about the same fucking thing. But this is what I mean. This is what I say when I'm like, people just don't want to learn more about anything. They just want to be locked in these assumptions.
Well, you know, and it's funny, like, you know, we're talking about kind of going to this other direction where, like, you know, maybe more towards a spiritual nature than a religious one. But and you were talking there, and Werner Heisenberg said, and I had to like Google it because I'm like, it's such a good quote. The first gulp from the glass of natural science will turn you into an atheist, but at the bottom of the glass, God is waiting for you.
Oh my God. What a great quote.
That is such a great quote. And it's like, it's not what we think it is. Whatever it is, it's not there. And there's another one, and I would Google that one too, but it was basically saying something like, perhaps the ultimate goal of science is to understand the nature of God.
Well, like think about God, right? God over the years has diminished in definition. The definition of God has gotten significantly narrower than it was in like, you know,
very
like,
true.
You know, God used to be in charge of fucking eclipses and rainstorms and droughts and fucking all other manner of nonsense, right? But as we learn more, God got narrower, right? Like we just started to get a little skinnier on the God definition, right? And you know, there's a what was that show? Seth MacFarlane, Star Trek.
Oh, I almost started that the other day too.
So it's a great show, actually. I got to tell you, it's super well written. But there's an episode in there, and I don't want to give it away for anybody who hasn't watched it, because it's actually one of the coolest written episodes of TV I can remember. They came upon a planet that was in a synonym to our dark ages, right? And they went down on the planet to kind of take a look. And one of the kids broke her arm, or fucked herself up somehow, right? And
Yeah.
and it wasn't anything that these future people couldn't do. So this woman from the ship pulls out a little gun and waves it over her arm, and it's back to normal. And these people were basically like, and I'm sorry, this was more like not cavemen, but like still nomadic humans, right? Like this went back. So they go back on their ship, with their findings, and all of a sudden the planet disappears. The whole planet just disappears. And 24 hours later, the planet reappears. And they're like, what the fuck? They go back to the planet, and it had fast forwarded 1,000 years on Earth.
Wow.
Right? Yeah. And so they go back down, and now it's like the Renaissance or the Dark Ages, some older time, like, whatever. And there's religion around her name.
She became a god.
She became a god, right? And then the planet disappears again. It comes back. Now they're in like Renaissance, right? And now the Church of Eve, or whatever her name was, right, is the Catholic Church. It's massive. It's the biggest owner on the planet. There's corruption. There's everything. And she goes in there and tries to claim that she is that god, and they basically try to burn her alive as a heretic, right? And
that sounds like what would happen now.
Yeah, but so here's the thing: the planet disappears again, then it's normal anyway. It wasn't until they went 1,000 years ahead of where they were in humanity that it got interesting. They come back super chill, yogi type fucking people, and like, neck tight athleisure, like spandex material, come back, and they left one of the life forms as an inorganic, like AI. So he went and stayed with them for the 1,000 years because time wouldn't make any difference to him. And so he came back and reported on everything that happened, and they basically evolved out of religion. They still were very spiritual, but there was no longer a disagreement that there was not a dude named God. You know what I mean? Like there wasn't and it was fascinating because, like, look at where we're going with all of this shit, right? Like, we're all gung ho about being able to do a God helmet, right? Or how vitamin D affects your fucking boner, or whatever the fuck it is we're talking about on this thing, right? But at the end of the day, all this shit is because we're fucking stupid and young in our evolution, and we're just figuring shit out. Like we're like the evolutionary like equivalent of like a toddler.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, you know what I mean? Like, and we're just kind of like bouncing into walls still. Like, but fast forward 1,000 years, that's definitely not the case, right? So, like, God helmet, what is that? You just think differently, and all of a sudden you are different. Like, it's like, you know what I mean? Like, we have a mastery over this. Like, we know placebo effect cures more disease than actual drugs, right? Like, I don't know. I just can't help but to think that like all these things come into focus. And
I think I think we're kind of circling back to that whole encyclopedia thing. The more knowledge we have, the faster that knowledge changes, and the further away,
right,
our viewpoint is. Like we can see much further now.
Yeah, and you know how you get that choice in newsletters to be like, do you want to be notified every time somebody comments, or just like once a day or once a week? We're gonna have to do that for everything.
Yeah,
like everything, because you can't possibly set a Google alert in that world for like, news on, Cocker Spaniels. It's going to get to the point, no matter how micro niche your interest is,
it's going to be so much information.
There's going to be so much information all the time. You can't, you're going to have to do like a daily digest. Like, okay, here's the shit that changed today. We're not going to go article by article, because quite frankly, shit's too crazy, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know. Then you're going to basically have to do like meta analyses of Monday.
Yeah. Well, and it could be every hour. It's like,
You're
oh
like,
look, we got 30 studies on this one little thing that just ran, and that, like, we were screwing around with the AI, and it's going to be like, well, they're going to be able to process that stuff and just constantly drinking from the fire hose with
well, I'll
information.
tell you what, man, AI, and I think one of our next to be episodes should be on the AI part of health, because it's building fast, and
It's going to be so crazy, and
yeah,
and
but
it's going to knock out so many careers in health and wellness, which is, I don't know how I feel about that. I'm
it's
kind of
going to
like, that's
knock
kind of
out
cool.
careers. It's going to knock out careers, but it's going to create a bunch of new ones.
Other
Right?
careers,
Like,
yeah.
you know what I mean? Like, so I think like smart people are going to be fine. I think people who, again, it's those people who can't change the underlying assumption, right? The underlying assumption, if you're a yoga teacher, is that teaching yoga is the way you pay your bills. Well, the smarter one said, well, not really, because like there's a million yoga teachers, but you know how you could really make money is teaching how to be a yoga teacher and charging, the
Yeah.
$600 or whatever for the yoga, license, training, whatever. And like, it's going to be the same way. You're going to get certain people that are going to be like, okay, well, look, here's how you run AI data and here's how you run AI studies. And like, I'm going to just start crunching numbers,
and
you
and
know?
get at it, yeah.
Yeah, and just get at it. And I think that like, but that's the amazing part, right? Like we're gonna have access. You watch like next year this time, we should look back on this episode and just kind of like remember, like, God, we were
Like,
like we were like dum dums.
we
Like,
said so much stupid shit.
yeah, totally. Because like the thing is like next month we could recap the same topic and we're gonna have something that's different. You know what I mean? Like, and so
Absolutely. Well, and everything will have, like, there'll definitely be more info out too. It's
but this AI stuff is crazy. Like I said, give me 2,000 words on why WordPress is a great CMS and do so in a comedic tone. It gave me 2,000 words that I could have published right on the spot.
it just hit send and it's good.
Hit send and it's good. Yeah.
It's crazy, man.
And that would have taken me 2 or 3 weeks with the copywriter probably. And probably cost me, over $1,000,
Well, I hate to say it, because I was toying with the idea of just finishing up my books with
Sure.
AI. Like, go chapter by chapter. This is what I'm talking about, and see what happens.
So a buddy of mine bought the corporate license for ChatGPT,
Yeah.
and he said there's no limit. It just you basically could write as much as you want, and like it's an intriguing.
You could be cranking out New York Times bestsellers. I believe that.
I believe that.
I believe that.
Yeah. Well, who knows? We'll see. Well, I mean, it's somebody's going to do it. Somebody's working on that shit literally right now.
And I would never even tell anybody. I do it. They'd be like, "Oh, that's a great book." Yeah. Where'd you get the idea? I don't know. I was taking a dump and it just came.
Yeah, it just came to me like a rocket ship of inspiration right to my brain. Right. Nowhere else. But no, you know what though? I mean, I think actually somebody put it nicely to me the other day. He said, AI is probably really good at what it does, but what AI is really good at is what nobody's saying it's good at, which is it's good at curing the blank page itis. Like,
yeah,
you know what I
can
mean?
see
Like,
that.
Like where you're just like, hey, I got to start forming the snowball. How do I get this going? Hey, give me 1,000 words on, God helmet, right? Like, and like, just see what comes up and then be like, okay, I like this idea. This idea is dumb, and like start kind of, then you can get the ball rolling. And I think from that perspective, it's probably unlikely that you couldn't use that as a muse.
Yeah. And God, I think this is another one of those things where if you were specific enough, just like the artwork, I fed it this many,
Right.
Seeds. How much of that is actually mine, and how much of that is actually, here's what I would have done had I
Right.
sat there and researched and done everything. but now I just had a machine do all the research and spit it out for me.
Sure. And I think that's I think that's happening now, but I think it's going to be like interesting because you're not going to be able to tell. We'll put it this way: everyone's going to be scrolling through the same shit, all written by fucking AI. Come to realize that nobody's got any writers anywhere.
Yeah.
Like, the so anyway.
Wait, what was it? We got to wrap up, but you remember that movie? What was it? What was the one? Bruce Leroy Brown? Was it The Last Dragon or something like that? Oh my God! It's a hokey. I don't want to call it blaxploitation, but like he's a kung fu guy and he goes look, it's from the early 80s. If you missed it, I'm not spoiling this here, but like he goes, oh, you got to find the guy that writes the fortune cookies, right? That's what his master tells him to do. And he's going around to Chinatown. He's looking, he gets into it with like, these guys, and he starts making friends with these Chinese guys. And then at the end, the Chinese guys show him who's writing the fortune cookies, and it's a computer. It's like oh, the secret was inside you the whole time, kind of thing.
That's hilarious. So what are you getting into these days, man?
I hopefully not too much. I gotta say, I bought the kids a VR
sweet.
for Christmas, and I immediately downloaded the Trip app.
Yeah,
which is a meditation app.
Why wouldn't you?
I've been using it more than they have. Like the whole system. I mean,
Dad just needs his own.
Well, at this point, they don't really like. I'm like, this was your big gift,
right?
You guys you're not playing it. I'll play it.
Yeah, I'm taking it. I'm taking it on. Yeah. Oh, that's
what are
funny.
You up
to? So I'm in full nesting mode at the moment. We're in the office. Walls are up.
Nice.
The space has been defined in my brain now. I've actually sat in it. So I'm creating my perfect environment. And actually, I'm actually using it as a potential to talk about here with you, because like I'm thinking about it. Like, I mean, look, I wouldn't do any of this to a room that I already had. Like, I don't think I'd go through this level of effort for a retrofit.
Yeah.
But when you have nothing there and it's like literally just walls, you kind of just really have every option you ever would want. So I spent 6 months writing down notes by the rooms that we were doing in my notes.
Yeah. And
so that I knew that by the time it came to do it, I would just have a year of thinking about the problem. Right. And so that's exactly what I did. And so it's been fun to get those things off of the paper into real space. But yeah, that's all I'm doing, man. It's hard to focus on anything but that, because once I get through this, like I feel like I'm just going to be in such a better mental headspace to have.
You're going to claim your space back, kind of thing.
Yeah. So yeah, that's it. Nothing exciting right now, but anyway, well, hey, listen, man, hope you're good, doing well as always. And
man,
I think we've said everything there's to say today.
Yeah, we'll definitely catch up soon.
All right, man.
All right, take it easy.
Be subversive, irreverent.
Health is wealth, but you knew that.
Everybody knows that.
But so is following us on social media at Irreverent Health. And check out our website for more exclusive content at irreverenthealth.com.
Oh, I like this.
Thanks for tuning into this episode of Irreverent Health.